everyone, welcome back to Papa's Workshop. In my shop, I love to do a lot of different types of projects, whether it's building cabinets, working with the CNC machines or the lasers, and even 3D printers. But one of the other passions that I have is I really like to do the wood turning. And with wood turning, there's one aspect that you have to become very proficient at, and that is actually sharpening the tools. Now, over the years, I've always hand sharpened the tools, and with some relatively good success, but it's not consistent. Today, I want to add a jig to the grinder that's going to make sharpening these tools much easier to do and get much better results. The grinder that I use to sharpen the different tools with is this one, and this is a very old grinder. If you look right down here, the date is in 1979, so that is quite old. Now, the other thing I want to point out to you is the RPMs. The RPMs on this is 3,450 RPMs, and that's actually really too fast to be really effective with the tools. But this is what I have, but I would certainly recommend that you guys have a low RPM grinder to be able to sharpen your lathe tools. But today I'm going to set this old 1979 grinder up with the jig to be able to sharpen these tools. Now, in my cabinet that I have all my lathe accessories and tools, I have the actual wood turning tools right here when I first open up the cabinet. And then behind that, I have all the other supplies that I use on a regular basis when I wood turn. But what I want to concentrate today on are these tools. This is a skew that I actually reground the shape on it and changed it. And you can see there's some imperfections here as far as how it was ground. And today this is one of the tools that I want to be able to solve and fix the grind on this and make it much better. Hand grinding is not always the best way to do it. This is one of the tools that I've had that I use for the pin turning a lot. It's a little small gouge, and it's very well used, and it's got a lot of turning time on it. But if you look at this, you can see over the years where it's not consistent. This is different height from here to the other side, and it's not a nice, smooth, rounded grind. So again, this is the result of many years of hand grinding. So again, today, we want to fix this one also. Now, with this system from the VEVOR company, I want to be able to point out a couple of things that I do not like. And I'm going to get those out of the way right now up front, and then we're going to concentrate on assembling this the correct way with the grinder that we have. Now, I want to get up close for a moment and show you, if you look at this right here, you can see how this was dented. And it was a pretty significant dent. And what had happened was, now when this was shipped to me, this clamp was already installed, and it would not slide at all because they had actually clamped it down so tight that they bent the metal. That was not a good thing. So the only thing that I had to do is just take a hammer and be able to flatten this back out so that it would slide through this assembly. And now you can see that it slides freely. But when I purchased this, it was so tight, I actually had to use pliers on this handle to be able to loosen it, and the resulting damage was this significant bend in this material itself, not allowing it to slide freely through this vice little grip. And that was a big problem. So you have to be aware that sometimes bad things will happen inadvertently in the shipping process, and in this case, when it was packaged, it was tightened down so tight so it wouldn't move and rattle around that it caused a major problem. Now, the other thing that I definitely do not like is consists of the instructions. There's really no instructions at all. So from that standpoint, if you don't understand how this gets assembled, you're going to be at a loss. Now this is patterned after the Wolverine Woodturning Jig Sharpening System, so it's really set up with the same exact measurements. So if you're familiar with that, then you'll be okay. But I'm going to take you step by step and show you exactly how to set this up without the instructions, because they, quite frankly, are completely useless. As I said in the beginning, this grinder is very, very old. Well, the base that I built for it was done also years ago, and it has served well. But this platform that the grinder is actually sitting on is a little bit small for our needs. Now I'm going to add an auxiliary top on this grinder just to be able to make this platform a little bit bigger and be able to have this jig attached to it. I also need to move this wheel. I want to put an actual grinding wheel on this. So we're going to take, I've already loosened that. So we'll take this off and store it. And I want to put the guard back on this because I'm using not the diamond wheels. I'm actually using a regular grinding wheel. The grinding wheel that I'm actually using also is very, very old, but it's still going to serve the purpose. But this is rated for 3,450 RPM, and that is what this particular machine is rated for. So this is what I'm going to put on there. Now with any of these stone type grinding wheels, they are subject to actually breaking, and that's why I have to have the guard back on here. Now this wheel is actually a 6-inch wheel. I know in a lot of different setups that people have, they'll use a 8-inch wheel. But again, I'm going to use what I have, and I'm going to set the machine up accordingly. Actually, for years now, I've had the grinder set up in a different configuration. And these parts have been stored away. And yes, I did keep them, and I didn't lose any of the parts, including the screws itself. So that was a good save, because I knew at some point in time I was going to be putting the grinder back together to the original form. And today is that day. In my research looking at the Wolverine Sharpening System, I found actually a number of companies that sell the same similar product. VEVOR is one of them. Penn State Industries is another that has a very similar product. The first consideration we have to have is the measurement from the center of this wheel to the base needs to be 6.5 inches. And if we look at this, this one is right at 6 inches. So I need to raise this a 1/2 inch. So the first thing, I'm going to get a piece of plywood the size of the base of this machine and cut it out to be able to raise this up a 1/2 inch. The plywood that I'm using is just from the scrap bin, and I found a piece that was actually the correct width, and all I needed to do is be able to cut this to 7.5 inches. Okay, I have the base now. That is going to be perfect. That sits on here. And if I turn this around, let's measure this distance now. And it should be about 6.5 inches. So if we measure that, that's just under 6.5 inches. I think that'll work. That's about 6 7/16. I need to mark now where the holes need to be drilled. While the grinder was sitting on this piece of plywood, I roughly measured exactly where those holes were. And then with the speed square, I just transferred it. That'll be the holes right there that I'll drill to be able to mount this. Now that I have the base cut that actually will raise up the grinder off of the workbench, I need to add a new base that all of that will sit on. And I did some measurements, and it looked like about 18 by 12 is going to work out real well. And I'm going to show you exactly how you lay this out to attach this jig to it so that it'll work properly. Because unfortunately, the instructions didn't cover any of that information. Again, I went to the scrap bin and grabbed a piece of plywood that was left over from a previous project, and it was just under the 18 inches, so that's going to be close enough. And then I just marked the 12 inches, and then from there I'll be able to cut it. And that way it's just one cut, and I'll throw the extra piece back over in the scrap bin that I'll find a use for later on. But now I have the base cut. Now this is just a scrap piece of plywood that I had, and this is the 12 inches, and this is roughly 18, and I think that's going to work out just fine. Now there's going to be some layout lines that I need to put on here, but basically what's going to happen is this center bar needs to be able to slide right into the center line of this wheel, and the same thing on the other side. This center line of the rail that will go in. The other thing, I want this set back about 2 inches from the front edge, and that's going to be for alignment on one of the tools that I need to grind. So I'm going to set that at my 2-inch line. I'll center the grinder in this space, and then we're going to set this up where this front edge right here is perfectly in line with this. So approximately what we're going to have is that sitting right there with this on the center line, and that would need to slide over just a little bit. So approximately right there is where that needs to sit. First thing I want to do is have a setback line right here at my 2 inches. So I can put this right there, slide that right along, and that's going to give me a good 2-inch line to be able to work with. So that's going to be in place. The other thing I want to do is center this. So this actually ended up being about 17 7/8. I'm just going to this little number right there. That's going to give me the halfway mark. And all I'm doing is lining this up at an even number. So I have that at the 20, this down at the 0. I mark this at the 10, and that gives me the center point. Just a quick little tip. So that will be my center point right here. This piece of plywood is actually 7.5 inches. So 7.5, I want to divide that. That's 3.5, 3 3/4. So I'll measure this off 3 3/4 right here. And then that will be able to be placed right there. And that will be on the center line of my piece of wood. And I have that now marked exactly where it needs to be. So at this point, I can go ahead and drill these holes all the way through so that I can bolt it to my base over there and get this ready to set up. Now as far as these, I'll line these up with this front edge here, because that actually looks like it's real close to the wheel, and I'll verify that, and we'll mark the holes to be able to screw this down. So pretty simple operation, but let's take it step by step now and do this. Now the original screws that I held the grinder down to the workbench that I had are going to be too short, so I'm going to have to get another set of bolts for this. Now I've found a mixture of different bolts that I can use, so this will work just fine with these washers, these nuts, even a galvanized one, but the length is what I need, and this will work just fine. So yeah, it's a little bit of a mix match. Now put just a little waste block underneath. I have this block exactly where I want it. I'm using a 1/4 inch brad tip bit to be able to drill through this. I think that bit's a little dull. Okay, change bit just to a regular 1/4 inch bit, and we're going to continue again. That's much better. Now, of course, this is oversized, and that's okay, because I did not want to rebuild a brand new stand. But I want this just pulled forward just a little bit. I think that will be fine. And I think another thing I want to do, I want to round over these edges so I don't take a chance on bumping into it and getting cut or hurt. So let me round over those edges real quick, and then we're going to come back and position this right where I want it and be able to screw it down. Now I'm just taking a washer This is roughly about 1.5 inches. I really don't know the size of it, but I think that will make a nice little radius right there. So I'll round that off. We'll do the same thing on this side, and I'm going to do it on all 4 corners. Now I took this over to the bandsaw first and just cut the corners off just so there was not as much sanding. And then from there, sanding was very, very easy, just to sand right up to the line. The next thing I want to do is line these up and get these positioned right where they need to be so that I can screw those down as well. Now remember, the front edge of this wheel needs to be even with the front edge of this. So we're going to set that up here. And right on that 2-inch line looks really, really good. Now as far as the center point here, we'll set this up. All right, that's about as good as you can get it. So I'll take a pencil and mark that right there. Now I don't know if that's square, so I'll square this off here in just a second and make sure that that's a line square. And now we're going to do the same thing to the other side. Now the good thing is I already know that this pencil line right here is going to get the alignment on the vertical. I need to get this centered now. So we'll put that square right there. We'll line that up to the center. We'll bring this over to the center line. And that is going to be the point. Right there. All right, so I'm going to put a straight line now back on each side, and we'll be able to mount those. There we go. Same thing on the other side. Now I want to find some screws that I can screw into here. Everything's already pre-drilled, so I don't have to worry about that. I just need to find the 4 screws that I can now mount that right there on that point, and then we're ready to assemble. Now this makes it so nice because all I need to do is just find the right one and I have the right bit. This is so much better than having to do what I used to and dig around in the drawer to find the right bit. So this was a perfect way to organize my bits. That's the one I need. Have this exactly where it needs to be. I think that's what I'm going to do, is just have a little bitty hole, and then I'll be able to put a mark there, put a mark there with my awl. Lie back over in position, and let's get the drill. Perfect. Now let's do the other side. Now I marked a little center line here. This is the center line of this one. So now I want to be able to see exactly where I want to be able to pull it forward. And I think if I pull it forward about 1.25 inches, that will be good. Bring this now over. And we can get the screws in. Okay, I've got the screws in. There we go. All right, it is all done. Now we'll put this one in. Now one thing I wanted to point out too, this is actually twisted. This actually got bent, so I don't know if that took place in shipping or if that took place on how it was made. But this is shifted over about a 15-degree angle. That should be vertical. This will still work for this. I'll be able to take this and line it up exactly on the angle here. That looks good. I can clamp it down and then I can sharpen this gouge. Now I can also mark this right here, so I can duplicate this each time by putting a mark there. I'll put that as a 1, and I can mark this as a 1 right there. And that way each time when I'm doing the sharpening, I can pull this right out to that point, line it up there, and be ready to sharpen the gouge. Now as far as this side, I'm going to need to remove this, and I don't need this plate right here, so I'm going to remove that also. Now this needed to be turned around the other direction, and that's easy to do. I'm just using this Allen wrench. I'm going to pull this out and then just tighten it up. There we go. Now I can use this to be able to make the adjustment. Put this up where I need to have it and tighten it back down. To be able to get this set, I'm going to mark this tip, and we'll see where it's cutting. And you can see it's cutting right on the very tip. And now it's catching both the back edge and the front edge, so that will be good. So let's now take and sharpen this one with a jig for the first time in its life. I'm sure a number of you are going to point out to the fact that this stand is wobbling a little bit. Well, there's 2 reasons for that. One, the floor is a little bit uneven because I used to have ceramic tile on this floor years ago. And the other reason, yeah, the stand's probably a little bit out of square too. But that's okay. The real big problem is that this stand is going to be at lightweight for the operation that I have. Now I do have a simple solution for that. I'm going to be putting in a 60-pound bag of cement here in just a few minutes, and that will solve the problem. So cleaning this skew up made a world of difference, and I think that's the sharpest this bit has been since it was brand new out of the box. But that cleaned up that whole edge, that got the angle nice and straight again. So that is what I'm looking for. I need to do the same thing to this one. Let's mark this and see where it's actually cutting. We'll mark the tip like that. Get right in here. And you can see it's grinding just about in the center. So that will be good. So now let me go ahead and shape this up again for the first time in its life. And you can see how this edge is considerably lower than the other edge. So this will actually take a little while to really get cleaned up. Now in just that couple of minutes, you can see how that is grinding and taking out that rounded edge. And it's grinding more on this side than it is on this side, and rightfully so, because this is so much higher. So this, like I said, will take a few minutes to be able to get completely ground, but you can see how that is cutting from that front edge all the way back. And see how this tip had been poorly ground in the past. So this is really going to make a difference on this tool. Now I put the grinder back into its home right next to the lathe, and I added 60-pound weight to the bottom of it. This stand has been lightweight for a long time, and by adding this 60-pound bag of concrete, that is going to make it much more stable. Now the more that I looked at this bar and how this was out of square, this bar was not bent and twisted. This actually was welded on at that angle. So that is a production problem and a quality issue that is not going to hurt just this one center point. But if I added an accessory to be able to do the skew on this particular side, then that would be an issue. So literally in a matter of just about 5 minutes, I was able to clean up this one and make it look much, much nicer. Now when I need to sharpen it, it's only going to take a matter of seconds to be able to do it, and I'm right back to using the lathe. Now as far as that skew, same thing. It cleaned up very nicely and it only took just a couple of minutes. So this is going to be a very nice addition to the shop to be able to help out with the lathe work and the wood turning that I do. And now I don't have to hand grind anymore. I can use a very nice jig. Now as far as this tool, this is designed to be able to get a 23-degree angle on this. But the problem is, with the one that I have, this will not screw down and actually hold tight against the tool. I don't want to rely just on that spring. So what I plan on doing is designing a little spacer that'll go in here, and I'll print it out on the 3D printer. And then from there, I'll be able to show you how this will work. I want to thank everybody for watching this video today. And if you like wood turning, you need to have a jig like this to be able to sharpen your tools. Hand sharpening is not really the best way to do it. And unfortunately, I've been doing the hand sharpening for way, way too long. And you can actually see the problems when I actually use the jig to be able to sharpen it. So I hope that you enjoyed this video and was able to get some good benefit out of it. And if you did, by all means, please take a moment, hit that subscribe button down there and the little bell notification. I would certainly appreciate it. And again, I want to thank everybody for watching this video, and I want to especially thank the Patreons who support this channel. And for now, I'm going to say bye-bye, and I can look forward to seeing you in the shop again real soon. Putting that 60 pound of concrete down there at the base of this stand made all the difference in the world. This makes it now where it's a much more usable tool, especially having not only the concrete, but having this jig to be able to sharpen the tools. It'll make a huge difference. So in some upcoming videos, I do plan on getting the lathe back to work and making some projects.